In Washington and some parts of Europe, people are cautiously welcoming the long-awaited phone call between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday, because it may open up more discussion about ending Russia's brutal war in Ukraine. Additionally, it represents the most decisive action China has taken to date toward assuming the mediatorial role that it has hinted at playing for months. However, the hour-long discussion, which is thought to be the first between the two leaders in the 14 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, also offers few specific recommendations for how China might assist in bridging the devastating, war-torn gap between the two countries. Its timing, which coincides with Beijing's intense focus on bolstering ties with Europe in the face of deteriorating relations with the United States, suggests that China is considering other factors in addition to peace, according to analysts. Since the start of the war, relations have deteriorated significantly as European leaders have watched in horror, as Beijing has refused to denounce the invasion, and has instead strengthened its ties with Moscow on the diplomatic and economic fronts, including by siding with Moscow and accusing NATO of fomenting the conflict. China's top diplomat in Paris said in a televised interview that former Soviet states have no status under international law, which was interpreted as a possible nod to Putin's position that Ukraine should be a part of Russia. This week, Beijing's efforts to mend those relations suffered a serious setback. According to Brain Hart, a fellow at the China Power Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, it is difficult to separate the timing of the Zelensky call from those events. It's likely that Xi timed the call to allay fears in Europe, but it's unclear how much the call will benefit Beijing. Although higher-ups in Beijing later retracted the ambassador's comments, the damage had already been done, and Beijing's efforts to mend its deteriorating relations with much of Europe had failed. On March 21, 2023, in Moscow, after signing a joint statement, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping shook hands. After the call, Zelensky, who had been eager to speak with Xi for months, spoke about his hopes for China's contribution to world peace, describing it in his nightly address to Ukrainians as an opportunity to use China's political influence to restore the strength of the principles and rules on which peace should be based. According to a Chinese readout of the call, Xi pledged that China would not sit idly by, and announced plans to send a special envoy to advance communication with all parties toward peace talks. This action is similar to what Beijing has done in other regional conflicts like Afghanistan and Syria. But little information, other than the appointment of Li Wei, a former Chinese ambassador to Russia, as the envoy, has been made public by Beijing, leaving it unclear as to what precisely China could or hopes to accomplish. In October 2022, during military training at a firing range in the southern Russian region of Krasnodar, recruits hold their weapons. Russian ground forces are bigger today than when the Ukraine war began, U.S. general claims. Russia is steadfast in its refusal to cede territories it has obtained illegally, and Ukraine has vowed to fight until its legitimate borders have been restored. No one believes that either Russia or Ukraine are prepared to sit down and talk at this time, according to Yun Sun, director of the China program at the Washington-based Stimson Center. The Chinese also have realistic expectations about what they can achieve, Yun Sun added. Instead, China's decision to contact Zelensky at this time may be an effort to take advantage of French support for its mediating role, following a recent visit from French President Emmanuel Macron to China, and to obtain any benefits from Europe. For China, the fact that the war isn't likely to end soon doesn't mean it shouldn't take advantage of the chance to boost its diplomatic clout and influence, as well as to deepen its goodwill toward Europe. Even though no mediation is guaranteed to be successful, China gains significant credit for trying, she said. With its foreign ministry announcing the call in a rare, invite-only special press briefing in Beijing on Wednesday evening, China has already shown that it is prepared to improve these optics. However, another set of optics: Beijing's close relationship with Moscow has already instilled in the West a deep skepticism regarding China's potential for serving as a mediator. Despite a long-standing strategic partnership between their nations and Xi's claims of neutrality since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the two leaders have spoken 5 times, twice in person, without Xi picking up the phone to call Zelensky. When China's defense minister visited Moscow earlier this month, he praised the increasingly consolidated trust between the two nations. China has also continued to conduct military drills with Russian forces. Widely regarded in the West and in Kiev as being significantly more favorable to Russia than Ukraine, a vaguely worded political settlement to the conflict was announced by China on the anniversary of the invasion and presented to Zelensky on Wednesday. It requests a ceasefire, but does not specify that Moscow must first withdraw its troops. 5 lessons from Xi and Putin's talks in Moscow. No way to piece this track record in Xi and Putin's close personal ties, which were highlighted during the Chinese leader's 3-day visit to Moscow last month, are likely to damage Xi's credibility in Zelensky's eyes, analysts say. But this connection has also been the cause of some leaders' expressed optimism that Xi will use his influence to persuade Russia to abide by international law, including Zelensky and Macron. Analysts claim that if China were to play a mediating role, it might change its political settlement stance to one that Ukraine would find more palatable. Additionally, it might attempt to press for progress by standing in solidarity with other non-Western nations that have demanded the start of peace negotiations, such as Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was in Beijing earlier this month. However, Beijing might also be cautious to avoid pressing certain buttons due to the critical importance of the China-Russia relationship, which could undermine the likelihood of effective mediation. According to Steve Tsang, director of the SOAS China Institute in London, there is no indication that Tsai is trying to get Putin or Russia to make concessions of any sort, and the Chinese readout of the call does not include anything concrete that can start a peace process. Given that the war is an existential one for Ukraine, it cannot find any foreign mediation is credible if the mediating party is clearly supportive of the stance of Russia, which started the invasion, he continued.